Alexander Moresko joins me now from Copenhagen, Denmark. He's the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee in Ukraine's parliament. And so thank you so much for joining us. We've just seen, some of the images, the harrowing images of this air assault on Ukraine, which is now being said to be the second largest since the war began. And this is just 2 weeks after we saw President Trump and President Putin meeting in Alaska, a show of diplomacy. But for you, for Ukrainians, what does this air assault say to you about President Putin's ultimate plan and commitment to end the war?
Well, it's a very clear signal and demonstration of Russian war criminal Putin that he rejects all peace initiatives, ceasefire initiatives put forward by President Trump. Putin demonstrates by these assaults, by these attacks against civilians in Ukraine, that he is not interested in any kind of peace, in any kind of agreement, and in diplomacy, which might create conditions for a ceasefire. I would like to remind that Putin, as a result of these attacks, was dead. Mission of the European Union, British Council, the building of British Council was heavily damaged. And before that, there was a damage delivered against one of their American enterprises in Ukraine. And it demonstrates in itself that Putin is waging war not only against Ukraine, but also against Europe and against the United States.
I want to talk about this meeting with Ukrainian officials and U.S. officials in New York today, but I quickly want to ask you this, because this, as you say, this airstrike and these strikes really do show what President Putin has been all about. Frankly, every time we see diplomatic talks, even President Trump has come out on X saying that he's not happy with Putin's response and how aggressive he's been in Ukraine. My question to you is, do you believe that President Trump is being hard enough on the Russians? Do you believe that sanctions would work to push President Putin into a corner?
Well, first of all, I believe that President Trump has enough power, enough opportunities and tools to put maximum pressure on Putin and to make him negotiate in earnest. What should be done? President Trump himself mentioned these tools like secondary sanctions against those countries which provide lifeline to Russian war machine. He also mentioned tariffs which should be applied against Russia and its allies. So all the tools are at the disposal of President Trump. And now the question is when he will use tools to put pressure on Putin, on Russia, and to bring them to the table of negotiations.
Yeah. So in terms of the Ukrainian delegation in New York meeting with U.S. officials, what do you think the messaging is going to be? And again, we go into these talks under the shadow of these aerial assaults.
Well, at present, I'm very skeptical about any kind of tangible result which can be produced now, because Putin, as of now, he's not interested in earnest negotiations in good faith. He is only dragging his feet, and his goal is to win the time and to avoid imposing sanctions against Russia. That's his goal. That's why he will continue to create this imitation of negotiations. He will continue to pretend that he's negotiating, but in reality, he is not negotiating. He is only using it as a distractor.
But in terms of the Ukrainian side and the messaging to U.S. officials, what more can Ukrainians and the Ukrainian delegation send a strong message to the U.S. about, as you say, continued support, but also to ensure that they get that President Trump ultimately is more coercive with President Putin?
Yeah, we need to persuade, to convince President Trump to enhance support of Ukraine by providing military assistance to Ukraine, including air defense, because what we saw yesterday it's a problem, huge problem, because we don't have enough air defense in order to defend our civilian population. Additionally, we need serious sanctions, including secondary sanctions and tariffs against those countries which buy in huge quantities Russian oil and gas and thereby are feeding Russian war machine. I'm sure that President Trump, as a person who is committed to peace, will take this into consideration and will finally deliver on his promise, because his initial promise was with regard to unconditional ceasefire. And he promised, in case if Putin rejects this proposal, he promised severe consequences.
I want to talk about the fact that Russian president is going to be meeting with President Xi, Chinese president, as well as the Indian Prime Minister Modi. What do you make of this alliance, and what message do you think that sends?
The truth is that China right now is Russia's ally, because they have an agreement about strategic partnership without limits. And China, by buying Russian oil and gas in huge quantities, thereby China is giving money for Russia to continue to wage war against Ukraine. China is considered to be the decisive enabler of Russia's war against Ukraine, according to the documents of NATO. And it's true. And the only thing which should be done by President Trump also is to impose necessary sanctions on those Chinese companies which buy Russian oil and gas.